My name's Claire Monroe. I'm 39 years old, living in Boston, and I used to think I had a marriage people envied. Successful husband, dream home, a complete family. After 10 years of marriage, I was always the one who remembered our anniversary. This year was no different. I came home early from a conference in Dallas, carrying a small gift and a smile, looking forward to seeing his surprise. But when I opened the bedroom door, there were no flowers, no candles. My husband and my own niece in each other's arms, on the very bed where we said our vows. You might think that was the worst part. It wasn't. That moment awakened a different version of me. A woman who didn't break, but plotted a response to the very end. If you want to know what I did after that ruthless betrayal, listen closely to the rest of this story. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, if I gave enough, love would be the safest thing in my life. Aubrey came to live with me when she had just turned 22. My sister, Linda, was going through a messy divorce with her second husband at the time. She'd lost her job, lost her home, lost her direction. And Claire, the successful sister, once again became the shelter for the family. I didn't hesitate. Despite a packed work schedule, I cleaned out the guest room, helped Aubrey apply for internships, shared every meal, every small trip, as if she were my own daughter. There were nights Aubrey cried on my shoulder over her first heartbreak. I held her tightly and said, "You don't have to become anyone else. You just have to live true to your heart." I never expected her heart would one day choose to stab mine. And Nathan, the man I once loved more than myself, he was never the romantic type. But once I believed we had true companionship, I was the one who withdrew my initial investment to help him open his architecture studio, back when no one else believed in him. I co-signed on his first business loan because I trusted his talent, and when the firm grew, I quietly celebrated for him, never asking, never calculating. My family used to joke, "Claire already has everything, she should pass her luck on to someone else." Everything? I used to swallow cold dinners in my office because by the time I got home at 10 p.m. the only light on was from Nathan's office. Not because he was waiting for me, but because he was up working on his side projects. I tormented myself over not having time for children, thinking if I took even a year off, everything would fall apart. That so-called everything they talked about was just a shell I built, so no one would see how lonely I was in the home I created. Aubrey once told me I was the strongest woman she'd ever known, probably because she never saw me cry. I never let myself be vulnerable around family. They needed me to be the one who could handle it, and I did. For my sister, for my niece, for my husband, for a family that never really understood the price I paid for the role they silently assigned me all those years. I used to believe that if I was kind enough, no one would ever want to hurt me. I was wrong. I don't remember how long I sat in that brightly lit kitchen after I kicked them out. I remember my hand clutching the glass of water. It was ice cold, and the soles of my feet went numb like my body no longer belonged to me. The next morning I woke up very early, not because I wasn't exhausted, but because I couldn't sleep. There's a strange kind of silence after the truth explodes. Not loud, not chaotic, just a void so vast you feel like you could fall into it and disappear. But I didn't disappear. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account, the one Nathan and I used for mortgage payments, household shopping, and the occasional vacation I squeezed in. Then I started tracing the details. I looked at every transfer with a clear mind. I discovered Nathan had been moving a few $100s each month, not enough to raise red flags, but over time it added up, to a personal account I never knew existed. The recipient was someone named R. Jennings. The name meant nothing until I found the real estate transaction record, a small apartment in Vermont, registered under Rebecca Jennings, but with Nathan's signature on the personal loan agreement. A move far too familiar. It was exactly how I once helped him start his own firm. I then checked the photo cloud, automatically synced from Nathan's phone to our shared account, though he rarely noticed. The pictures didn't just feature Aubrey. There was another woman, dark hair, sharp features, standing next to Nathan in front of a wooden cabin. In another shot, they were walking through the snow, holding hands, like they were living a life untouched by anyone else. And then, a third woman appeared, younger, probably an intern. I spotted her in a group photo at Nathan's office, a celebration of a successful project. The way her eyes followed Nathan reminded me of how I used to see him when I was in love. I didn't feel pain anymore, only a chill. In one of the email files I found, there was a thread between Nathan and a financial attorney. Not the family lawyer we usually used. Nathan had already started the process of transferring a portion of the studio's ownership to someone else. Quietly, bit by bit, like he was clearing the path to disappear. I laughed. Turned out, the day I caught him with my niece wasn't the end, it was just the key that opened the door to everything I'd chosen to ignore. As a financial planner, I was used to analyzing small numbers, cold data lines, but when those numbers became the map of betrayal, the step-by-step exit plan to leave me without warning, it was no longer just data. It was evidence, a wake-up call, a second knife, deeper, not to the heart, but to the mind. I didn't tell anyone right away. For the next 10 days, I moved like a shadow, still going to work, still greeting coworkers, still signing contracts on time. But underneath that calm surface, every cell in me was focused on one goal: counterattack. The first person I called was Jenna Harris, my best friend since college and one of the most respected divorce attorneys in Massachusetts. We'd weathered many storms together, but this time, I didn't need a friend to cry with. I needed someone who knew the law, and knew me. I brought all the evidence: financial documents, photos, transaction history, even a voice recording of a call between Nathan and a woman named Elise. Just minutes after reviewing the file, Jenna looked up at me, her voice low. "Claire, do you realize what you're holding? This isn't just about divorce anymore. This is a deliberate character takedown campaign, and with what you have, you could absolutely pull it off." We started with the foundation, legal and financial. Jenna guided me in filing a request to freeze asset transfers under the pretext of ongoing investigation. At the same time, she advised me not to file for divorce immediately, but to stay in control and force Nathan to show his cards first. The next layer was social, and it didn't come from a media campaign or social networks. It started with women like me. I traced Nathan's past transactions and, from the names of restaurants and hotels, identified 3 faces that showed up repeatedly. One was a marketing executive, one an interior designer, and the last made my blood run cold when I saw her name: Rachel Givens. Rachel had been my assistant for almost a year, a bright, driven young woman who often asked me about fundraising for her startup. I cared for Rachel like a younger sister, even wrote her a recommendation to a major investment firm. She left the company suddenly, with no explanation. I didn't ask, thinking it was a personal decision. Now I knew why. I found Rachel through LinkedIn. My message was short and simple: "I'm not reaching out to blame you, I just want the truth. If you're willing, we can meet one afternoon, wherever you choose." Rachel agreed. We met at a small cafe by the Charles River. She was thinner than I remembered, her once bright eyes now tired, but still sharp, like someone who knew exactly where they'd been hurt. I handed her an envelope containing photos of Nathan with other women. Rachel stared in silence for a while, then said, "I knew. I used to believe I was the only one. I really thought he was serious, especially when he promised to invest in my startup if I left your firm. But after a few months, everything just faded. No replies to texts, ignored calls, and the project, not a single dollar. Do you regret it?" Rachel looked at me, eyes slightly red but no tears. "Yes. But not because I loved the wrong man. I regret betraying someone who believed in me without question. You were the first person who saw something bigger in me. I let someone like Nathan make me forget that. Then don't let that be the end. Do you want to help me bring everything to light? Not for revenge, but so no one else has to go through what you did?" Rachel nodded, without hesitation. Over the next 3 days, I met with the other 2 women. Each had her own story, but the structure was identical: seduced, emotionally drained, and abandoned. None of them had met each other. none of them realized they were part of a pattern. I gathered testimonies, emails, text messages, receipts, everything that proved Nathan wasn't just a cheating husband but a calculated manipulator who knew how to choose his moment, target vulnerabilities, and quietly turn the women around him into silent casualties of a game only he knew the rules to. I didn't have to tell them what I planned to do next. They all said the same thing. If you need me to be a witness, say the word. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for nearly 20 minutes. Not to pick a dress, but to decide which face I'd wear. I'd attended events like this many times before, playing the role of the accomplished wife, quietly standing beside the celebrated husband. But this time, I wasn't walking in to stand behind him. I was walking in to end a lie that had gone on far too long. The exhibition was held at a large gallery in downtown Boston, commemorating the 15th anniversary of Nathan Monroe Designs. Guests included the entire architecture scene, trade press, investors, former and current clients, all people who once saw Nathan as the model of a successful entrepreneur and devoted husband. I arrived early, parked my car, wore a charcoal beret and the deep blue silk blazer Nathan once told me made me look too cold. I chose that coldness on purpose. As I entered the main space, I spotted him chatting with a group of young architects, that familiar smile, arms loosely crossed to seem approachable. He hadn't seen me. I didn't approach. I walked straight to the tech control table at the back of the hall, where a staff member was reviewing the slideshow files for the central LED screen. I gave a soft smile and handed over my speaker credentials, something Jenna had arranged through an anonymous sponsor. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "I'd like to update my slideshow. This is the latest version." I handed over a small silver USB drive, no questions asked. 20 minutes later, the soft music faded. The MC took the stage to introduce Nathan, the founder, the visionary, the man who laid the foundation for dreams to take shape. He walked up to applause, and I stood at the very back, glass of water in hand, waiting. His speech was like always, confident, smooth, pleasant. He spoke about sustainable urban design, about uncompromising belief in beauty. Then the lights dimmed for a slideshow showcasing the firm's signature projects. But the first slide wasn't a building. It wasn't a design. It was a screenshot of an internal email titled Vermont Villa Draft Private Client. In the corner was the Nathan Monroe Designs logo. At the top, a timestamp. The draft created during business hours, using a company technician's account. Then came a series of images, hotel receipts, photos of Nathan walking with a woman toward the cabin featured in the design, and bank transfers from the company's account to a personal one under the name R. Jennings. Not a sound in the room, only the soft, steady click of slides advancing, each one a brick crumbling in what used to be a carefully built reputation. The final image was a summary chart. Date, time, private project, misuse of company resources. When the lights came back on, Nathan was still on stage, pale, arms limp at his sides. His eyes scanned the room as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Then, he saw me. I didn't flinch. I met his eyes and held my ground. A silence filled with weight. The kind that only comes from someone who's been dismissed too long and was finally reclaiming her voice. A murmur rose behind me. Then another. Investors started whispering, some pulling out their phones, no doubt texting. Jenna once told me, "When people with money lose faith, careers collapse faster than any scandal ever could." I turned and left the hall before the MC could step in to recover. I didn't need to stay to hear Nathan's excuses. No excuse held weight when the truth had just been broadcast on a 6-meter screen in the middle of downtown. And this time, he couldn't shut it off, couldn't delete it, couldn't rewrite it. I walked out. The wind was cold, but no longer cutting. The call came on a Monday morning, just as I was making coffee in a kitchen that hadn't seen Nathan in nearly 2 months. Linda's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until the 3rd time before picking up. Her voice came through like someone running from themselves. "Claire, can we talk? I don't know where to begin. It's about Aubrey. She was recently kicked out of her museum internship. They didn't give a clear reason, but I know. Her friends have started to pull away, some even sent angry messages. She's falling apart. She's not eating, not sleeping, just locking herself in her room. Linda's voice cracked at the end of her sentence. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't feel pain. There was simply nothing left to say with surprise anymore. I had known this moment would come. Claire, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But would you be willing to meet the family, just once? I think they need to hear it from you, not through the media, not from gossip, but from you, from the person who was hurt the most. I took a deep breath, then agreed. We chose Saturday afternoon at my parents' house in Newton, the old, warm home where my sister and I grew up. When I arrived, the air inside was heavy, like everyone was holding their breath for something inevitable. My parents, older and frailer than I remembered, sat still at the long wooden table. Linda stood in the corner, her face pale as if recovering from a long illness. Aubrey, dark circles under her eyes, tangled hair and a sunken face, curled up at the end of the table. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table. I remained standing. I placed a thick file folder on the table, opened it, and pulled out each document one by one. Restaurant receipts with the cardholder name listed as Nathan Monroe, signed for private client use on the payment slips, screenshots of messages with dates, times, words, and locations, disturbingly intimate conversations between Nathan and Aubrey. While I was away on a business trip in Houston, bank transfers, wiring money into Aubrey's personal account from Nathan's company account, labeled as art research support, and finally, photos, the two of them walking hand in hand outside the Vermont cabin. The angle was tilted but clear enough. In one picture, Nathan leaned down to kiss Aubrey's forehead. Aubrey trembled as she reached for the papers, then pulled her hand back. Linda covered her mouth with one hand, tears spilling silently. I looked around the room. Every piece of evidence is here, not because I need you to know what happened, but because I need you to see clearly. I don't retaliate with rumors. I fight back with the truth. A long silence followed. I spoke slowly, each word pulled from my chest. You might ask why I made a scene, why I didn't let it pass quietly. But don't ask why I chose to act, when the two people I loved most were the very ones who destroyed me with their betrayal. Linda broke down. Aubrey buried her face in her hands. My father quietly pushed a glass of water toward me, but I didn't touch it. I hadn't come to negotiate. I came to end the illusion this family had lived in for far too long. And in that moment I was no longer the obedient daughter, the responsible sister, or the forgiving aunt. I was simply a woman standing among the ruins of herself, choosing not to step back. The meeting happened on a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Nathan arrived on time, just as I expected. He was always punctual in situations he couldn't control. I greeted him in the living room, the one that used to display our wedding photo, now just a bare wall. The coffee table was cleared off, with only a single black folder and 2 glasses of water. I didn't want anything distracting from the focus of this conversation. Nathan wore a white shirt, collar unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. No trace of his usual polished look. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, his hair grown out, untrimmed. But I didn't ask. I wasn't there for small talk. I gestured for him to sit, then slid the folder toward him. These are the divorce terms I'm proposing. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at me, voice hoarse. Claire, does it really have to be like this? I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to understand that any justification was now worthless. Finally, he opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then froze when he reached the asset division section. I spoke, calmly. You'll retain 10% of the total marital assets. That includes your former shares in the company, real estate investments, and your share of the undistributed profits from the past 3 years. This house belongs to me. And the company I'm building, you will have no rights to interfere in any form. I pulled out another envelope from my bag, this one gray. If you don't agree, here's the contingency plan. A file documenting your misuse of company resources for personal purposes, including images, internal emails, and falsified work logs, will be submitted to the Architectural Ethics Board. I paused. I also have enough documentation to send to the IRS should they take interest in the misreported expenses from your studio over the past 3 years. And I doubt your clients would be thrilled to learn the man who designed their luxury homes also designed a mistress's cabin during company hours. Nathan leaned back, eyes closed for a few seconds, like he was trying to stabilize something inside himself. I didn't interrupt. It was time for him to hear the weight of his own breathing. He opened his eyes, voice smaller. Claire, I was wrong. I've made a lot of mistakes. But not everything between us was a lie. And I looked him straight in the eye. Then what part was real, Nathan? Because I lived in that marriage for 10 years and still didn't know who you were. Did you? For the first time, the look in his eyes wasn't guilt or fear. It was recognition, that he understood exactly what he'd lost, that he knew there was no way back, and that I, the woman who once believed in him without condition, had now become the one setting them. He lowered his head. I'll sign. I had the pen ready and handed it to him. He signed without asking a single question. A marriage ended in cold ink and 2 people who had gone too far to find their way back. A week later, Jenna informed me. Nathan had withdrawn his professional complaint, resigned from his old studio and moved to Arizona, taking a temporary position at a small firm, earning only a third of what he used to. I didn't feel triumphant. The only emotion I had was a silence that reached the depths of my soul, like I had finally untied the last knot binding me to a man I once trusted with my entire future. I left the old house on a Monday morning, under clear skies and soft sunlight. No one came to see me off. Only the hourly moving truck driver and me. The rooms that once echoed with laughter, with arguments, with all the nights I waited for Nathan in silence now stood strangely empty. I didn't take much with me, just a few boxes of books, my favorite armchair, and some small handcrafted items I'd quietly collected over the years but never really had time to admire. I drove 4 hours up to Vermont. There, a small red-roofed bungalow nestled among the pale green maples just beginning to turn. The house had only 2 bedrooms, a bright enough kitchen, and a backyard patch just right for planting daisies, and a few lavender bushes. No expensive iron gate, no smart AC system, no phone-linked doorbell, but the very first afternoon I stepped inside, I knew. This was home. I started each day with small things, making coffee, pulling weeds in the garden, reviewing my list of former clients, and opening a fresh notebook. No more back-to-back calls, no more Zoom meetings from morning until night, just quiet mornings, and nights deep enough that I no longer woke up shaken by nightmares or unanswered questions. 3 months later, I officially launched a private investment consulting project for middle-aged women. Those who'd been betrayed, lost their financial confidence, or had let someone else dictate their future. I didn't call it a service. I called it the second plan, because I understood too well what it felt like to rise from the wreckage and not know where to begin. The first sessions had only a few women, a wife recently divorced after 25 years, a retired teacher who had been conned out of her savings, a Mexican-American nurse raising 2 children alone. They weren't like me, but the grief in their eyes was the same. I told them how I once let myself believe someone would always handle the logistics of life. I spoke plainly about what I did after my divorce, from analyzing personal assets and reworking priorities to reclaiming control through the smallest numbers. Not to prove I was strong, but to show them that starting over is never out of reach. Gradually, thank you emails came more often. The talks grew more regular. At local libraries, women's centers, even in small town halls where single mothers gathered to share parenting stories. Each time I stepped off stage, I felt like I reclaimed a little more of myself. No longer Nathan Monroe's wife. No longer the woman from the media scandal. Just Claire. The woman who knew what she wanted and knew she could get there, even alone. There were a few men, too, some attending the talks, some lingering during breaks, pretending to ask about risk fund allocations, then casually asking for my email. A doctor divorced 2 years ago, a library director with a warm voice and an easy laugh. They were respectful, thoughtful, never pushy. Some left cards. Some just said, if you ever need help fixing a faucet, just call. I smiled, grateful, but didn't open up. Not because I'd lost faith in love, but because I didn't need it to define myself. I was replanting a garden once trampled, and before letting anyone step into it, I wanted to make sure the soil was strong enough to bloom again. I received Aubrey's letter on a late autumn morning. Cream-colored envelope, slanted handwriting I knew well, no return address. But the way she wrote Aunt Claire on the corner told me everything. I left it on the kitchen table for 3 full hours before opening it. Made a pot of tea. Watered the lavender on the porch. Confirmed next week's work schedule. I did everything I could to delay, not because I was afraid, but because I knew one late apology could shake someone who'd fought hard to stand upright. The letter was 12 pages long. No embellishment, no dodging. Aubrey wrote about what happened after that night at the exhibition. When everything started to fall apart, Nathan cut off contact just 2 months after his license was suspended. No goodbye. He simply vanished. Blocked her number, moved out of state. All those promises about the little house, the art project, the whispered plans for Europe, had never been real. All she got were reversed credit card bills in her name and an unsigned rental agreement on an apartment she couldn't keep. She wrote, "I know you'll never see me the way you used to, and I don't blame you. I just needed to tell someone that I know what I did. And I'm sorry." I didn't cry, my hands didn't shake, but when I folded the letter I had to sit still for a long time, my chest tightening like something heavy was pressing down. Aubrey used to rest her legs across mine during movie nights, mouthful of popcorn, giggling. I took her to her first college orientation, taught her how to tell the difference between someone who likes you and someone who truly cares. I never thought I'd one day have to teach her the cost of betrayal. A week later I got a message. "If you're willing, I'd like to meet. Just once. To look you in the eye and tell the truth." I replied, "Saturday. That little cafe by the forest edge, 3 p.m. Aubrey arrived on time, thinner. No heavy makeup, no trendy accessories. Just a girl in a gray sweater and faded jeans. She sat across from me, hands clasped tight on the table to stop them from shaking. We didn't exchange pleasantries, we just looked at each other. The moment was so quiet, I could hear the clinking spoon from the next table. She spoke softly. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand. That I've lived long enough with what I did to realize the real cost isn't losing someone. It's losing the part of yourself you once took pride in." I let her words hang in the air, untouched. Then I answered, "I don't carry hatred, Aubrey, but I also don't carry you in my life anymore." She pressed her lips together and nodded slowly. "I understand, and I accept that." Ah. We sat for a few more minutes. She told me she was back in school, living with her mother, working part-time at the town library, that she was learning how to live without anyone telling her she was special. I told her I was doing fine. Still planting, still working, still drinking afternoon tea like always. As we got up to leave, Aubrey gently placed another letter on the table. "This is for me, but I want you to have it if you'd like, in case one day you need to know that I didn't waste the lesson you forced me to learn." I never thought I'd write a blog. Back in my Boston days, I lived behind spreadsheets, analyzing, forecasting, adjusting. Numbers were silent. They didn't tell stories, didn't protest, didn't expose. They were just right or wrong, and I felt safe there. But on a winter morning, sitting in my quiet kitchen, I opened my laptop and typed my very first headline. "How many times do you have to be stabbed before you learn to turn around?" I didn't name names. No Nathan, no Aubrey, no tabloid-worthy drama that once splashed across headlines for weeks. I simply wrote about what it feels like to be betrayed by those who once spoke your name with gentleness, and about rising not from rage, but from the realization that you cannot live forever in the role of the victim. I shared what it meant to start again. A garden, a little house, a new path I chose, not one handed to me. I wrote about the women I'd met at my workshops, those quietly picking up the pieces of their lives with trembling hands that never stopped trying. And I asked, why are the people who hurt the most often the ones who stay the quietest? That post was shared more widely than I ever imagined. Some wrote thank you notes, some shared their own stories. Even some men, those who once stayed silent about their own wrongs, sent brief, quiet apologies. No one knew the author was Claire Monroe, the woman once caught in a family scandal that shook Boston's architecture scene, and I didn't need them to know. Because the validation I sought was never external. One afternoon, when the soil softened after the last frost, I rolled up my sleeves, pulled on gardening gloves, and planted the first lavender shoots in the backyard. Their scent rose gently, like a reminder that even the past can soften if we learn to listen to it without letting it scrape us raw again. Beside me was the draft sketch of a senior living home my team and I were designing. Not a temporary shelter, but a real home, for older women abandoned by their children or with nowhere else to go. A place with trees, a tiny library, afternoon art classes, and chamber music on weekends. I named the project The Second Bloom. The financial fund I created post-divorce was the foundation for that dream. A portion of the profits from my one-on-one consulting and public talks went straight into that account, dollar by dollar. No noise, no fundraising campaigns. Just a quiet transformation of pain into hope. I know I can't save anyone from loneliness, but if I can create a place where they don't have to be lonely in silence, then maybe what I went through wasn't just loss. I planted the last lavender shoot, stood up, brushed the dirt from my hands, and looked up at the sky behind the roof. The late sun touched my arms gently. The breeze was cool, but no longer cold. Each of us has our own limit, only sometimes we pay dearly to discover where that line is drawn. For me, betrayal didn't end in tears or rage. It ended with a choice, to rise, to answer not with vengeance but with a better life. And you? If one day, the person you trusted most turned against you, would you walk away in silence or speak up to reclaim what you deserve? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story, because sometimes the words of a stranger touch something deepest in our hearts. And if you'd like to keep following true, heartfelt, and thought-provoking stories about family loss and healing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every story is a slice of life, and somewhere in what's to come, you might just find yourself.